I'm Elizabeth, and I'm 28 years old. For the past 3 years, my family watched me struggle to afford basic groceries while they handed my sister Emma a blank check for her third wedding. They called my financial difficulties character building. They said I needed to learn responsibility. They told everyone who would listen that some people just needed to figure life out the hard way. What they didn't know was that while they were funding Emma's $45,000 fairy tale wedding, I was quietly building something they never expected. Something that would change everything between us forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you've ever been the family member who gets dismissed while watching others get endless support, this story might feel familiar. And if you've ever had your family underestimate just how capable you really are, then you'll understand exactly why what happened next felt like both vindication and heartbreak all at once. Let me take you back to where this really started, because the wedding was just the final straw in a pattern that had been building my entire life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up, Emma was the golden child. She was 3 years older than me, and from the time we were small, she seemed to glide through life while I stumbled through it. Emma got straight A's without studying. I worked twice as hard for B's. Emma was naturally athletic and made varsity everything. I got cut from the JV volleyball team sophomore year. Emma had boyfriends lining up to take her to prom. I went with my friend Marcus because nobody else asked. But here's what I didn't understand until much later. Our parents weren't just proud of Emma's natural talents. They were actively invested in maintaining her success while treating my struggles as character flaws that needed correcting. When Emma wanted to go to state university, my parents paid her full tuition, bought her a car, and gave her a monthly allowance of $800 for spending money. When I graduated 2 years later and wanted to attend the same school, my parents sat me down for what they called a reality check. My mother explained that Emma had proven herself responsible, with money and grades, so she had earned their investment. I, on the other hand, needed to learn the value of hard work. They would co-sign a loan for half my tuition, but I would need to cover the rest through scholarships, work study, and my own savings. No car, no allowance, no safety net. I remember sitting at that kitchen table, calculator in hand, realizing that even with a part-time job and every grant I could qualify for, I still wouldn't have enough. My parents suggested community college for the first 2 years. Emma, who was listening from the living room, called out that it might actually be good for me to start smaller and work my way up. So I did. I spent 2 years at community college, working 30 hours a week at a grocery store, saving every dollar I could. When I finally transferred to state, I was 20 years old, exhausted, and about $15,000 in debt. Emma had graduated by then and moved back home while she figured out her next steps. My parents converted the basement into a beautiful apartment for her, complete with a kitchenette and separate entrance. They didn't charge her rent. I lived in the cheapest dorm I could find and survived on ramen noodles and whatever free food I could find at campus events. The pattern continued after graduation. Emma got hired at my father's accounting firm, making $45,000 a year in her first job out of college. When I graduated with my business degree, my father told me he couldn't hire me because it would look like nepotism. Emma. Working there was different, he explained, because she had demonstrated exceptional work ethic and family loyalty. I spent 6 months sending out resumes and working retail while living in a studio apartment that cost me $800 a month. My parents helped Emma buy a townhouse during this same period. They covered her down payment and co-signed her mortgage because her salary alone wasn't quite enough to qualify. When I finally found a job at a small marketing company making $32,000 a year, my family acted like I should be grateful for the learning experience. Emma had gotten engaged to David by then, and my parents threw them an engagement party that cost more than I made in 3 months. That first marriage lasted 18 months. The divorce was messy and expensive, but my parents hired Emma the best attorney money could buy. They helped her keep the townhouse and get back on her feet. When she started dating Michael 6 months later, everyone was thrilled that she had found love again so quickly. Emma's second wedding was even bigger than her first. My parents paid for everything, including a honeymoon to Italy that cost $12,000. I was barely making ends meet at my job, but I managed to buy her a gift from her registry, a set of kitchen towels that cost me $45. Emma thanked me politely. But I heard her telling our cousin later that it was sweet, how I always tried so hard, even though I clearly couldn't afford much. That marriage lasted 2 years. During the second divorce, my parents again hired attorneys and helped Emma navigate the financial complications. She had quit her job to focus on being a wife, so she moved back into the basement apartment while she figured out her next chapter. Meanwhile, I had changed jobs twice, finally landing a position that paid $41,000 a year. I was still living in my studio apartment, still budgeting carefully for groceries, still driving the same 10-year-old Honda I'd bought used during college. But I was stable, independent, and slowly paying down my student loans. When Emma announced her engagement to Trevor just 8 months after her second divorce was finalized, my parents were over the moon. Trevor was a contractor who owned his own business, and he seemed genuinely crazy about Emma. This time, they said, Emma had found her forever person. The planning for wedding number 3 began immediately, and it was clear from the start that this would be the biggest celebration yet. Emma deserved her perfect day, my mother kept saying. She had been through so much heartbreak, and now she finally had her happy ending. The budget they set was $45,000. For context, that was more than I made in an entire year. Emma wanted everything to be perfect. She hired a wedding planner who charged $3,000 just for coordination. She chose a venue that cost $8,000 for one day. Her dress cost $2,200, and that didn't include alterations or the shoes and accessories. The photographer cost $4,000. The flowers were another $3,000. Every week, Emma would call me to share updates about the planning process. She would talk about choosing between the filet mignon and the salmon, about whether to upgrade to premium liquor, about adding a chocolate fountain to the dessert station. These conversations usually happened while I was grocery shopping with coupons, calculating whether I could afford both vegetables and protein for the week. During one of these calls, I mentioned that my car had started making a strange noise, and I was worried about the repair costs. Emma made a sympathetic sound and then launched into a story about how stressed she was because she couldn't decide between 2 different chair rental companies. One cost $300 more, but the chairs were slightly more elegant. Hung up that day feeling something I'd never quite identified before. It wasn't jealousy exactly, because I genuinely wanted Emma to be happy. It was more like disbelief that my family could spend $300 debating chair elegance while I was trying to figure out if I could afford to fix my car. The next week, my car broke down completely. The mechanic estimated repairs would cost $1,400, which was more than I had in my savings account. I called my parents to ask if I could borrow the money and pay them back over 6 months. My father's response was immediate and firm. He explained that they had helped me enough over the years, and at 26 years old, I needed to handle my own emergencies. These kinds of unexpected expenses were part of adult life, and figuring out how to manage them would build character. He suggested I take the bus or ask friends for rides until I could save up for repairs. I spent the next 3 months taking 2 buses and walking a mile to get to work each day. The commute took 2 hours each way. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day and bought only the absolute essentials at the grocery store. I saved every dollar I could, cutting my budget so severely that I lost 8 pounds during those months just from eating less. During this same period, my parents upgraded the flowers for Emma's wedding from $3,000 to $4,000. $500 because she decided she wanted more elaborate centerpieces. When I finally saved enough to get my car fixed, Emma called to tell me about a crisis with her wedding dress. The shop had ordered the wrong size, and with only 6 weeks until the wedding, they couldn't get her original choice in time. Emma was devastated, but she had found another dress she loved even more. The only problem was that it cost $800, more than the original. My parents paid the difference without hesitation. My mother told me later that Emma had been so stressed about the dress situation that she had cried for 3 days straight. They couldn't let their baby girl's wedding day be ruined over something as fixable as money. I listened to this story while standing in my tiny kitchen, eating another peanut butter sandwich for dinner, because I had spent my grocery money on a bridesmaid dress for Emma's wedding. The week before the wedding, my parents threw Emma and Trevor an engagement party that cost $6,000. They rented a private room at an upscale restaurant and invited 40 people for a 5-course dinner. The wine alone cost more than I spent on food in 3 months. During the party, my Uncle Kevin asked me how work was going and whether I was planning to buy a house anytime soon. I explained that I was focused on paying off my student loans first and saving up for a down payment. Kevin nodded and said that was smart planning, but then he turned to my parents and asked if they thought I might benefit from some family financial guidance. My father launched into what I now recognize as a well-rehearsed speech about teaching financial responsibility. He explained that some people needed to learn money management through experience, and that helping too much could actually be harmful in the long run. He said I was building character through my struggles, and that someday I would appreciate having learned these lessons early. Kevin looked back at me with something that might have been pity, and said that it was good I had such wise parents who cared enough about my development to let me figure things out independently. Meanwhile, Emma was opening engagement gifts that included a check from our grandparents for $5,000, explicitly marked as wedding money. The wedding itself was beautiful. Emma looked stunning, Trevor seemed genuinely happy, and everything went exactly as planned. The venue was decorated with thousands of dollars worth of flowers and upgraded lighting. The meal was exceptional, with options that included both filet, mignon, and lobster. The bar served top-shelf liquor all night. The photographer captured every moment perfectly. I wore a bridesmaid dress that cost me $300 and shoes that cost another $120. I got my hair done professionally for $150 because Emma wanted all her bridesmaids to look perfect in the photos. These expenses consumed my entire discretionary budget for 2 months, but I wanted to support my sister on her special day. During the reception, my parents gave a toast about how proud they were to see Emma finally find her forever love. They talked about her resilience through difficult times and her ability to never give up on her dreams. They mentioned the support of family and how important it was to invest in the people you love when they truly need it. I smiled and clapped and felt genuinely happy for Emma and Trevor. But sitting there in my expensive bridesmaid dress, calculating that my parents had spent more on wedding flowers than I made in 2 months, something crystallized for me about my place in this family. After the wedding, life returned to normal. Emma and Trevor honeymooned in Hawaii for 10 days, another gift from my parents. I went back to my studio apartment, and my careful budgeting, and my growing sense that I was perpetually falling behind while everyone else moved forward. But here's what nobody in my family knew. During all those months of struggling, during all those conversations about character building and financial responsibility, during all those hours spent riding buses because I couldn't afford car repairs, I had been working on something else entirely. Every evening after my long commute home, every weekend, every spare moment I could find, I had been building an online business. It started small, almost as a hobby. I had always been good with social media and digital marketing, and I noticed that many small businesses in our area had terrible online presence but didn't know how to fix it. I started by offering to help a few local shops with their Instagram accounts for free, just to build a portfolio. Then I created simple websites for a couple of restaurants that only had Facebook pages. Word spread slowly, but it spread. Within 6 months, I was making an extra $300 a month helping small businesses with their digital marketing. I used every dollar of this income to pay down my student loans faster and build my emergency fund. But instead of telling my family about this progress, I kept working quietly. Something about their constant messages about character building and financial responsibility made me want to prove something to myself first, before I proved it to them. During Emma's wedding planning months, while she called me with updates about chair rentals and flower arrangements, I was landing bigger clients and more complex projects. I was learning web design, search engine optimization, and social media advertising. I was building a real business. By the time Emma walked down the aisle in her $2,200 dress, I was making an additional $800 a month from my side business. I had paid off half my student loans and saved $5,000 in emergency funds, but I still hadn't told anyone in my family what I was doing. 2 months after the wedding, Emma called me in tears. Trevor had lost a major contract, and their household income had dropped significantly. They were struggling to make their mortgage payments and pay for the credit card debt they had accumulated during the engagement and honeymoon period. Emma asked if I knew whether our parents might be willing to help them get back on their feet. She was embarrassed to ask directly, but she thought maybe I could feel out the situation for her. I called my parents that evening to casually mention Emma's financial stress. My mother immediately started planning ways to help. They could cover Emma and Trevor's mortgage for a few months while Trevor rebuilt his client base. They could help consolidate the credit card debt. They had some money set aside for exactly these kinds of family emergencies. Before hanging up, my mother asked how I was doing financially. I said I was fine, just taking things one day at a time and continuing to build character through responsible money management. My mother laughed and said she was proud of how well I was handling my independence. The next week, my parents gave Emma and Trevor $8,000 to catch up on bills and get back on solid ground. They also agreed to cover Emma and Trevor's mortgage payments for 3 months while Trevor's business recovered. This same week, I landed my biggest client yet, a regional restaurant chain that wanted me to overhaul their entire digital marketing strategy. The contract was worth $4,000 up front and $1,500 monthly for ongoing management. I still didn't tell my family. Over the next year, my business grew steadily. I was working with 12 regular clients and earning more from my side business than from my day job. I had paid off all my student loans and saved $15,000. I was looking at buying a condo and upgrading to a newer car. My family continued to see me as the struggling daughter who was slowly learning financial responsibility through hardship. During this period, Emma and Trevor's financial situation improved significantly. Trevor's business recovered and they were doing well again. My parents were proud of how they had helped the young couple weather a difficult period and get back on their feet. Emma would still call me occasionally to chat, and our conversations had evolved to include subtle advice about money management. She would share tips about budgeting that she had learned during their difficult months, and she often encouraged me to be patient with my financial progress. Everyone's timeline was different, she would say, and I shouldn't compare my situation to anyone else's. These conversations usually happened while I was working on client projects in my apartment, earning more per hour than Emma made at her day job. But still, I kept my business private. I had started for reasons I couldn't quite articulate, but now I was continuing for reasons that were becoming clearer every day. I wanted to see how far I could build this without any family support or recognition. I wanted to prove something to myself about what I was capable of when left entirely to my own resources. 18 months after Emma's wedding, I quit my day job. My business was generating enough income to support me fully, and I wanted to focus on growing it even further. I told my family I had received a small inheritance from a great aunt I barely knew and was taking some time to figure out my next career move. My parents expressed concern about this decision. Leaving steady employment to pursue undefined goals seemed financially irresponsible, especially for someone who had struggled so much with money management. They worried I would run through my inheritance money quickly and end up in worse financial shape than before. Emma offered to help me create a budget to make the inheritance money last as long as possible. She had learned a lot about financial planning during her difficult period, and she thought her experience could help me avoid similar mistakes. I thanked them for their concern and told them I was being very careful with my decisions. By the end of that year, my business was generating $6,000 monthly in revenue. I had 15 regular clients, a waiting list for new projects, and had hired a part-time assistant to help with administrative tasks. I had saved $30,000 and purchased a reliable used car with cash. I also started using some of my income to help other people in situations similar to what mine had been. I offered free website services to women starting businesses with limited budgets. I mentored college students who were trying to build freelance careers while managing school expenses. I quietly paid off lunch debt for kids at my old elementary school. But my family still believed I was carefully stretching inheritance money while figuring out my career direction. The revelation came unexpectedly, as these things often do. Emma called me on a Thursday evening in March, 18 months after I had quit my day job. She was crying, which immediately made me worry that something serious had happened. The situation was serious, but not in the way I had feared. Trevor had been injured in a work accident, and while he would recover completely, he wouldn't be able to work for at least 3 months. Their savings account had only enough money to cover about 6 weeks of expenses, and they were scared about how they would manage their mortgage and bills during his recovery period. Emma had already talked to our parents, but they were dealing with their own financial stress. My father's accounting firm had lost 2 major clients recently, and my mother's part-time job had been eliminated due to budget cuts. They simply didn't have extra money to help this time. Emma wondered if I might have any ideas about resources or assistance programs that could help them through this difficult period. She knew I couldn't offer financial help given my own situation, but she thought I might have researched options during my own struggles that could be useful now. I listened to my sister cry about not knowing how they would pay their bills, about the stress of Trevor's injury, about feeling scared and helpless in a way she had never experienced before, and I realized that the time for keeping secrets had passed. I told Emma I would call her back in an hour, and I spent that time preparing for a conversation I'd been avoiding for over 2 years. When I called her back, I started by asking if she could come over to my apartment. She said she would be there in 20 minutes. Emma walked into my home office and stopped in the doorway, taking in details she had never noticed before, despite visiting dozens of times. The 2 large monitors, the professional lighting setup. For video calls, the whiteboard covered with client project timelines, the stack of business books on my desk. I explained that I had been running a successful digital marketing business for the past 3 years. I showed her my client portfolio, my revenue spreadsheets, and my business plan for the upcoming year. I explained that I was making more money than she and Trevor combined, that I had no debt and significant savings, and that I had been financially stable for longer than she had known. Emma stared at the numbers I was showing her, looking confused and overwhelmed. She asked why I had never told anyone in the family about the business. She wanted to know why I had let them think I was struggling, when I was actually succeeding. She couldn't understand why I'd hidden something so important. I tried to explain about feeling dismissed and underestimated, about wanting to prove something to myself, about the strange satisfaction of building something entirely independent of family expectations or support. But what I told Emma next was the thing that changed everything. I said I would be happy to help her and Trevor financially during Trevor's recovery. I could cover their mortgage and essential bills for as long as needed, without interest or complicated repayment terms. I could do this because I had the resources, and because they were family, and because I understood what it felt like to worry about money. Emma started crying again, but this time from relief rather than stress. Then she said something that revealed just how differently we had been experiencing our family dynamic all these years. Emma told me she had always felt pressure to be perfect because she thought our parents expected her to succeed where I struggled. She said she had felt guilty about receiving so much financial help because she knew I had been working hard to support myself. She thought our parents helped her because they were worried about her, not because they loved her more. She said she had tried to offer me advice about money management because she thought I needed encouragement, not because she thought I was incapable. Emma explained that she had always admired my independence and self-reliance, but she had interpreted my struggles as evidence that I needed more support, not less. As we talked longer that evening, I began to understand that Emma and I had been experiencing the same family dynamic from completely different perspectives. What I had seen as favoritism, she had experienced as pressure. What I had interpreted as dismissal, she had meant as encouragement. But the more we talked, the more it became clear that while our perspectives had been different, the underlying pattern was exactly what I had always believed it to be. Emma confirmed that our parents had never expected her to pay back any of the money they had given her over the years. She confirmed that they had never suggested she needed to build character through financial struggle. She confirmed that when she needed help, the help appeared immediately and without conditions. And she confirmed something else that surprised me. Emma told me that our parents had often talked privately about being worried that I was too proud to ask for help when I needed it. They had wanted to offer more support over the years, but they thought I would be insulted or feel like they didn't trust my independence. This conversation was happening on a Thursday evening. By Sunday afternoon, everyone in my family knew the truth about my business and my financial situation. Emma had called our parents immediately after leaving my apartment Thursday night. She was excited to share the news about my success and relieved to explain that I would be helping them through Trevor's recovery period. My parents' initial reaction was pride and excitement about my achievements. They wanted to hear all the details about my business, my clients, and my future plans. But as the weekend progressed and they had time to process the full situation, their feelings became more complicated. My mother called me Sunday evening to ask if we could have lunch the following week. She said there were some things they needed to discuss about the way our family had been handling financial matters. We met at a restaurant near my father's office on Tuesday afternoon. My parents had clearly been discussing this conversation extensively before I arrived. My mother began by saying how proud they were of what I had accomplished and how impressed they were with my business acumen and independence. But then she asked the question I had been expecting. Why had I chosen to let them believe I was struggling financially when I was actually doing well? I tried to explain my reasons, but as I talked, I realized how my decision to hide my success had affected them too. They had spent years worrying about my financial stability and feeling conflicted about how much help to offer. They had made assumptions about my needs and capabilities that influenced major family decisions. My father pointed out that if they had known about my business success, they might have felt comfortable asking me to contribute to family expenses or celebrations. They might have treated our financial relationship more like equals, rather than parents protecting a struggling adult child. My mother mentioned that they had often felt guilty about helping Emma so generously, while believing I was barely making ends meet. If they had known I was financially stable, they might have made different choices about how to distribute their support. I listened to their perspective and began to understand that my decision to hide my success had created its own problems and misunderstandings. But then I asked them a question that I needed answered honestly. I asked whether they thought they would have responded differently to my car breakdown, my student loan debt, and my other financial challenges if they had known I was building a business on the side. My parents looked at each other for a long moment before answering. My father said they might have been more willing to help if they had seen evidence that I was actively working to improve my situation beyond just my day job. My mother said they might have viewed my struggles differently if they had understood them as temporary growing pains rather than fundamental money management problems. But then my father said something that revealed the deeper issue that had been driving our family dynamic all along. He admitted that they had always assumed Emma needed more help because she seemed less naturally equipped to handle financial challenges independently. They had assumed I needed less help because I seemed more resilient and capable of figuring things out on my own. They had been treating us differently, not because they loved one of us more, but because they believed we had different levels of capability and need. My mother added that they were proud of my independence, but she realized now that their pride in my self-reliance had sometimes prevented them from offering support they would have given automatically to Emma. This conversation helped me understand that our family's financial dynamics had been complicated by assumptions and misunderstandings on all sides. But it also confirmed that while the intentions might have been more complex than I had believed, the practical results had been exactly what I had experienced. Emma received immediate, generous support for any financial need, while I was expected to handle challenges independently as character-building experiences. Over the following weeks, my family and I had several more conversations about money, expectations, and the ways we had all contributed to misunderstandings. Over the years, my parents acknowledged that they had held Emma and me to different standards, and that this differential treatment had been unfair regardless of their intentions. Emma acknowledged that she had received advantages and support that she had never fully recognized or appreciated. I acknowledged that hiding my success had prevented honest communication and created unnecessary complications in our relationships. But the most important conversation happened about a month later when Trevor had recovered enough to return to work and their financial crisis had passed. Emma called to tell me that she and Trevor wanted to pay me back for the money I had provided during his recovery, even though I had said it wasn't necessary. More importantly, she wanted to talk about the broader pattern of financial inequality in our family and what we might do to address it going forward. Emma proposed that she begin paying back our parents for the various forms of financial support she had received over the years, not because they were asking for repayment, but because she now understood that their willingness to help her unconditionally had created an unfair dynamic between us. She also proposed that our family establish clearer guidelines for financial support going forward so that future help would be distributed more equitably. My parents initially resisted these suggestions, saying that they had helped Emma because they wanted to, not because they expected repayment. But Emma persisted, explaining that she needed to do this for the sake of her relationship with me and her own sense of fairness. Over several months, Emma did pay back our parents for her wedding costs, her house down payment, and the emergency funds they had provided during various crises. She calculated that the total amount was just over $60,000, which she paid back in monthly installments that fit within her and Trevor's budget. My parents used this money to establish what they called a family support fund, which would be available equally to both Emma and me for future emergencies or major life events. These changes didn't erase the years of differential treatment, but they created a foundation for more equitable family relationships going forward. I also made changes in how I communicated with my family about my life and achievements. I started sharing details about my business growth, my financial goals, and my plans for the future. I stopped hiding my success or downplaying my capabilities. Perhaps most importantly, I began using my financial stability and business knowledge to help other people who were experiencing family dynamics similar to what I had dealt with. I started mentoring young women who were struggling to establish financial independence while dealing with families that underestimated their capabilities. I provided free business consulting to people who were building side businesses while managing family expectations and financial pressure. I also began speaking publicly about family financial dynamics and the ways that well-intentioned parents can inadvertently create inequality between siblings. 2 years after the truth about my business came out, my relationship with my family has evolved into something much healthier and more honest than it was before. Emma and I talk regularly about money, business, and family dynamics in ways that would have been impossible when we were both keeping secrets about our true feelings and experiences. My parents and I have developed a more equal adult relationship, where they ask my advice about financial and business matters rather than assuming I need their guidance and protection. Most importantly, I have learned that hiding achievements and struggles equally can prevent the honest communication that healthy relationships require. But I have also learned that standing up for fair treatment within families sometimes requires demonstrating your worth in ways that force people to confront their assumptions and biases. The 3 years I spent building my business in secret were not just about proving my capabilities to my family. They were about proving my capabilities to myself and developing the confidence to demand the respect and consideration I deserved. Today, my business generates over $10,000 monthly, and I employ 3 part-time contractors. I own a condo, drive a reliable car, and have more money saved than I ever imagined possible during those months when I was eating peanut butter sandwiches and riding the bus to work. But more importantly, I have a family that sees me clearly and treats me fairly, and I have the knowledge that I can succeed even when the people closest to me underestimate what I'm capable of achieving. If you're dealing with family members who dismiss your struggles while supporting others generously, or if you're building something important while people around you question your capabilities, I want you to know that your worth is not determined by other people's recognition or support. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is prove to yourself what you're capable of, with or without family approval. Sometimes building character really does happen through struggle, but it shouldn't be distributed unequally among people who deserve equal support and consideration. And sometimes the best way to change family dynamics is to become so successful that people have no choice but to acknowledge what they previously overlooked or dismissed. Have you experienced similar family financial dynamics? Have you ever had family members underestimate your capabilities while overestimating others? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe, because sharing these experiences helps all of us feel less alone in navigating complicated family relationships. Remember that your success doesn't require anyone else's permission, and your worth doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition. But when you do achieve the success you're working toward, it can create opportunities for healing and change that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you feel empowered to pursue your own goals, regardless of who believes in you right now.